Hey everyone, we're finally doing it. Headbanger is getting his wish. I'm playing Long War of the Chosen proper. Now for those of you who don't know what Long War is, we'll get into that in a moment. I just wanted to say first up that I'm planning on doing this a bit differently to my other videos. I'm gonna try to release this as a series. I'm thinking each video will be roughly half an hour in length and I'll release them in parts. I'm aiming for one video every fortnight. Long War is just so, long. It's in the name. And I decided doing it as one massive project was just too overwhelming. Now I'm still gonna continue making my other longer videos, nothing is changing on that front. I just want to see how an ongoing series performs on my channel, and I think Long War is the perfect game to try out this experiment on. So let me know your thoughts in the comments. Do you like it? Do you not like it? We'll see how it goes. And with that out of the way, then we have the question, what exactly is Long War of the Chosen? Now put simply, it's an overhaul mod for XCOM 2. And a bit of a history lesson, some years ago, a group of modders who are now a game development studio, Pavonis Interactive, I think that's how you pronounce it, they made an overhaul mod for XCOM Enemy Within, the previous game. Now that mod's name was Long War, and I have played a ridiculous amount of hours in it. I've never actually finished it though, I always end up rage quitting. It's really hard. Anyway, when XCOM 2 came around, Firaxis actually worked with Pavonis and tasked them with creating a sequel to Long War for the XCOM 2 base game. And that's how we got Long War 2. Now when War of the Chosen came around, Pavonis opted not to port the mod to the new version of the game. They're actually working on their own original game, Terra Invicta, so maybe that had something to do with it. And I would like to check that game out on this channel at some point. Anyway, a group of new modders took on the task of making Long War 2 compatible with War of the Chosen, and thus, Long War of the Chosen was born. And throughout this series, whenever I say the phrase Long War, unless I specifically say otherwise, I'm referring to Long War of the Chosen. That's the mod that we're playing here, so that's the iteration that I'm interested in. So what exactly does this overhaul do? Well, it makes the game longer, obviously, and I think it does overall make things more difficult. It also adds a bunch of new mechanics, such as the new classes that I've been doing solo runs with for the last 2 years. But there's other stuff as well, and we will get into that. Now, I would say the mod is definitely worth a try if you haven't played it. I mean, it's free, so you've got literally nothing to lose. And the final thing before we begin, I may add a bit of narrative or role-playing elements to the videos just to add some story. Nothing as heavy-handed as my Phoenix Point videos because, well, they weren't that popular. But yeah, I will add some details here and there that aren't actually part of the mod. I'm just doing it for some story beats, because I like that stuff. Anyway, enough rambling, let's check out this mod.
We at the Advent Administration are hard at work 24 hours a day to protect and nurture our citizens. And never before has there been security and stability.
Before we begin the run, I've chosen 2 of the mod's advanced options to make things a little bit easier for us. Strategic Dominance gives us access to resistance orders. These were actually removed in Long War. Apparently they impacted the game's balance. But the thing for me is, resistance orders are a big part of War of the Chosen, so I wanted to include them. Similarly, we also have rank abilities active. Now this allows us to purchase multiple abilities at the same rank, such as giving a specialist both Revival Protocol and Combat Protocol as an example. Now we'll still need the training center to do it, just like we would in the vanilla game, but yeah, apparently this was also removed from the mod for balance, and it may end up with some of our soldiers being a bit OP towards the end, but again, it's a big part of the regular game, so I wanted to include it. And let's be real, I'm gonna need all the help I can get on this one, so we might as well go with it. I'm also playing on veteran difficulty, and for those of you who think that's too easy, the general advice I've seen with this mod is to play one difficulty below what you normally do when you play the vanilla game. So that's what I've gone with. I've also opted not to use integrated DLC, so we're going to be able to play the Alien Rulers and Shen's Last Gift DLC missions. Partly because I haven't played them for a while, and partly because I'm curious to see how the mod changes these missions, if at all. Finally, let's begin the gameplay. We start on the outskirts of Beijing. Agent Pang of the Reapers is escorting our newly freed Commander Drifter out of Advent captivity. The Sky Ranger has had to flee the scene after evacuating out Bradford, so it's up to our troops to kill their way to freedom. Now I did restart the run here several times. I wanted to both have Drifter on the team and start with the Reapers as our allied faction. It's the most lore appropriate. And I didn't actually use the starting soldiers mod here. I wasn't sure how nicely it would play with Long War, so the troops we're getting and which viewer submitted characters who appear, it's purely luck of the draw. Unless you Drifter, of course. Now this mission we're playing, it's the mod's version of Gatecrasher, but you'll notice we actually have 8 soldiers instead of 4. And while that is nice, there's also a lot more enemies. I think there's around 10. And look at them, they're not all basic troopers. There's an overwatching guy, a grenadier packing flashbangs, a dude with a heavy cannon, plus there's also drones that can stun us. So quite the enemy variety already. Now luckily we have Pang. This man has been travelling the countryside of Asia for years, wreaking havoc on Advent's goons wherever he finds them. So he knows exactly what to do.
Looks like a straight fight now.
And my goodness, this went well. After the initial explosion, the rest of the team overwatched the villains into paste. This was just a beatdown. Now Pang is a Reaper, obviously, but all the other troops are rookies, so the options with them are a bit more limited, but they do all begin the mission with a grenade and a flashbang in their inventory, which is really nice. And yes, that does mean a regular soldier can carry multiple grenades, and that's really cool. Now, the Reaper's abilities are quite different in Long War, and you'll see here Pang doesn't have a claymore as his secondary. He has a throwing knife. On top of that, his shadow ability is quite different to the vanilla games. It only lasts 2 turns. Now that may seem bad, and it kind of is, but the trade-off is that it has a 2-turn cooldown as well. So beyond that cooldown, we can actually use this skill as many times as we want during the mission. In the vanilla game, it's a once-only ability. So there's pros and cons, and this can be really good for Overwatch traps and just generally controlling when pods activate. And overall, I'm a fan of it. Now using the knife guarantees Pang stays in shadow concealment, while using his gun guarantees he'll lose that concealment. And as the battle plays out here, I'll make a few observations from my time with the mod so far. And keep in mind, I'm still quite early into things as I'm writing this script. Or recording this script, I guess would be more accurate. Anyway, one thing is that flashbangs seem much more useful than vanilla. It's very rare that enemies will land their shots if they're disoriented. No one-shot crits here, at least not in the early game. On top of that, full cover seems to be better than vanilla. It appears to be quite difficult to hit things when they're in full cover, either you or the enemy. Also, flanking is way more dangerous. If you can get in
Close range
with a flank, the hit chance is going to be extremely high. Unless you're using a long-range weapon like a sniper rifle or a cannon, then you want to have a bit of distance between you. But even then, flanking is the way to go. Like, even for regular rifles, I didn't have the problem of being point blank and flanking while still only having an 80-something chance to hit. The hit chances are really high if you can get in that position. And again, this works both ways, you and the bad guys. Now, the mission is successful, and afterwards the crew makes it back to the Avenger. So it's time for some promotions. And the 8 base classes are pretty much the same as the Long War II classes that I did all the solo runs with. So I won't spend too much time talking about each individual class. Now, as for the strategic layer, we do need to talk about that. See, Long War kind of changes the lore of XCOM 2. Rather than being a small group of resistance fighters acting under Advent's radar, the mod essentially sees us wresting control of the world from Advent's grip. We begin in New Arctic, and we will eventually be able to kick Advent out of this region and take it over ourselves. So we're kind of forming our own government, our own military, and each region can either be controlled by us or by the aliens. So it's much more of a war than the guerrilla tactics that we're using in the vanilla game. But we're still a ways off controlling this region. For right now, we have a haven in the region that we can manage. Now, the haven residents can do one of 4 things. They can gather intel, supplies, or try to recruit more people to the resistance. Additionally, they can also do nothing and just go into hiding, basically keeping a low profile. Now, Advent will take notice of our haven if it's too active, so hiding can be a good move at times. And when I say our operatives can gather intel, I don't mean the resource that we can use. I mean they're actually trying to find missions for us to deploy on, like literal intel. Now, as we recruit more people to the haven, there is a chance they can be faceless and they'll try to sabotage the settlement. So we can deploy a soldier here to sniff out any faceless, but I'm not going to do that just yet. Rather than a soldier, you can also place engineers and scientists in that advisor slot to give bonuses to supply and intel gathering respectively. For right now, I'm putting everyone to work on intel to find us some missions so that we can get the game started. We also have access to the black market straight away, and this is going to be our best method for gaining supplies early on, because we actually start off getting 0 supplies from council drops, so selling stuff is going to be necessary. So before long, the resistance operatives have found us a mission, and this one is to free some prisoners who will then join the haven. And deploying on missions may be the biggest change to the mod's mechanics. We actually need to infiltrate into the area. So instead of just flying in with the Sky Ranger and dropping out of the sky, we need to enter the area more subtly, draw less attention to ourselves, set up the operation, and then execute it when we're ready. Now, we can infiltrate anywhere between 0 and 200%, assuming that we have the time to do so. Most missions do have an expiry on them. And right now, I'm aiming to infiltrate every mission just over 100%. The higher our infiltration level, the less enemies that we're going to encounter on the mission, and the less prepared the enemies will be. The bad guys have certain states of readiness they can enter depending on how heightened their alert levels are. And if those alert levels get high enough, the bad guys can even scamper and attack you anytime you activate a pod. So infiltrating is definitely a good idea, and it basically represents XCOM picking their spots, waiting until Advent is at their weakest in that location, and then striking when the time is right. Now, there is a catch. The more soldiers we send, and the more equipment they have, the longer the infiltration will take. And soldiers become unavailable once they begin infiltrating. They leave the Avenger to deploy on the mission site and prepare the operation. While they're doing that, we cannot use them for anything else. So even though technically you can send 8 soldiers on most missions, you may want to send less in order to reach a higher infiltration level before the mission expires. So it's often up to you to decide how many soldiers do you need. And this seems to be a common theme in Long War. You as the player have a lot more agency to decide what's the best way to do things. For right now, most of the time I'm going with 5 or 6 troops whenever we can. And this infiltration mechanic is related to the haven management. The more resistance operatives that we have gathering intel, the faster they'll locate available missions. And that, in turn, gives us more time to infiltrate, and we can get that infiltration level higher, making the mission easier. And before Drifter's team has even finished infiltrating this mission, we find another 2 that we can deploy on. And look at this, one of them is listed as liberating the region. Now this will begin a multi-chain quest line to free this area of Advent control. Our first task is to hack a device the Resistance believes holds information on a VIP currently being held in Advent's custody. Now as for the third mission, it has a different prisoner that we can bust out, and that will give us our first engineer. The problem is, we've deployed all the non-rookie soldiers on the other missions. So in this one, it's all newbies being sent in, and only 4 of them on top of that. Now I'm not sure this is a good idea, but I really want that engineer, so we're gonna give it a go. Meanwhile, Drifter's team is ready for the jailbreak. Now we can keep infiltrating past 100% if we want to, but in this instance I don't think there's much point. You can see the enemy activity is at 7 to 9, meaning Advent will deploy somewhere in that range of enemies, and I don't believe it can actually go any lower, no matter how much we infiltrate. So we might as well just do it now. And we can't actually change our soldiers' gear at this point in time. We needed to do that before we started infiltrating. Now as things kick off here, I'll briefly mention gear, and I know I'm talking about mechanics a lot in this video. They won't all be like this, we just need to establish how these things work for people unfamiliar with Long War. So future episodes will have less emphasis on mechanics, and more on what's actually happening in the campaign. Anyway, what I wanted to talk about. Soldiers can bring 3 utility items plus a pistol. And they can even double up on grenades, unlike the base game. So you can equip 2 frag grenades on everyone if you want. Or 2 flashbangs and a frag grenade. There is no issue with multiple copies of the same item, unlike in vanilla. Now the default loadout most of our troops have is 1 flashbang, 1 frag grenade, and 1 shield vest thing. I meant to look up the name of that item before I started recording, but clearly I forgot. And the shield vest is what's giving all our troops that extra 2 HP. And I recommend always giving these to all of your soldiers, at least in the early game. Not only does it give us 2 extra HP, which we'll definitely need, if a unit only loses shield points and none of their actual HP, they will not be injured after the mission. So potentially a unit can take an attack and still be perfectly healthy after the mission's over. That's going to save on wound times, and wound times are pretty bad in this game. Spoiler alert. Now of course, just like with infiltration, and like most things in Long War, there is a trade-off. Every item we equip, including a pistol, that's going to deduct 1 movement point from our total. So the more gear a soldier is carrying, the more slowly they're going to move. So at this point, I'm still figuring out how things work, and I'm mostly sticking to the default loadout at this stage. The main exception are the sharpshooters. I remove all their items except for the shield vest, and I equip them with a pistol so they can still move and shoot. In addition, any soldiers that I want to be moving quickly, like assaults, I remove the flashbang from them, just to give them that extra movement. And I'm not really using pistols on any classes besides the sharpshooters. I just don't see much point. They've already got a gun that they can use. The one exception is that I will equip the Shadowkeeper on a shinobi for its ability to regain concealment. And the last thing I'll say about gear, at least for now, is that flashbangs put all the unit's grenades on cooldown for a turn. So if you use the flashbang one turn, you can't actually throw any grenades, even frag grenades, on the next turn. Not really a fan of this, but it is worth noting this restriction does not apply to grenadiers. They can throw out grenades every turn regardless. Alright, enough of that. Drifter's team has been successful, so let's check in on the rookies who have been sent to save the famous scientist known as German Guy. Get it? Because Einstein was... whatever. Now, we don't even have concealment on this mission, so we activate a pod on the first turn. Now, we can flashbang 2 out of 3 of the bad guys, but regardless of this, all 3 enemies make their shots. So I think I need to retract that statement about flashbangs being better than vanilla. They didn't help us here. I mean, at least the bad guys didn't get any crits on us, so that's something. Now, during our next turn, we can take out 2 of them, but one of the troopers is probably gonna survive, so I decide to flashbang him. Now, he thankfully misses this time, but the bigger problem is that once we move in to flank the last trooper, we activate a second pod, and we're really not ready to deal with this. Cloud takes a huge amount of Overwatch damage as we push forward, and after this I need to talk about the graze mechanic. See, there's a chance that when a shot hits, and possibly even when it misses, I'm not sure, but the shot can become a graze and do less damage than it normally would. It's kind of similar to a dodge in that regard. The thing is, this can happen on any shot that we take, at least as far as I'm aware. And so what should be an easy elimination for Mia with her 98% chance to hit, it's instead a graze and leaves the trooper alive. So this was really frustrating. And it leads to Cloud and Mia both getting taken down on the enemy turn. We just did not inflict the damage we needed to on these guys. And just like that, half our squad is gone. Actually, make that 3/4. Deathwing tries to press forward but gets shadow realmed by Overwatch. Yeah, those Overwatch soldiers can take a regular shot and still Overwatch at the end of the turn. They're brutal. At this point, Metler has no chance of defeating both enemies himself, so he's just gonna try and stall for time while German Guy tries to reach the evac. I'm hoping our VIP can get out this turn, but the dude is literally 1 tile short of reaching the evac. That is so XCOM, baby. This results in Metler having to stay for another turn and draw more fire, and it proves to be 1 turn too long. Despite hunkering down, he gets blasted by the captain. He's gone. The Overwatcher then takes aim at our VIP, and I was getting tense here. Now, thankfully he misses, and German Guy is able to make it out safely. If we had lost those 4 soldiers for nothing, I'd have been really mad. So it's cost us our entire team, but we've secured our first engineer. Not sure if that's a good trade or not, I guess we'll find out, and it does allow us to build our GTS a bit faster, as well as start excavating the Avenger. Alright, then the next mission, our first to liberate the region. We've got Ligmac the Specialist, Avian the Sharpshooter, and Chan the Gunner, and they're leading a couple of rookies. And I actually forgot to give Avian a pistol, which ends up being really annoying. If she had it, she could easily murk this 1 HP trooper. Sadly, that's not going to happen. And one really annoying thing I noticed while playing that's related to this subject is that the mod seems to auto-unequip utility items from wounded troops, even if it's an item you have an infinite amount of. And it doesn't re-equip them when the unit has recovered. So it adds this unnecessary micromanagement. I'm not a fan. Nonetheless, my complaining aside, we destroy these enemies and we can move on to the objective. Now, the mission has a sit rep that allows us to detect nearby life forms even if we don't have line of sight on them. Reapers actually have this as a standard ability, but for this mission, all of our units have it. So we're able to see the enemies hiding on top of the objective inside the building. And they are just not moving. It seems they're choosing to guard the device, which isn't a bad move, And in general, the AI of non-activated enemies does seem a bit more realistic in Long War than the vanilla game. Up-throttling is not a thing here, at least as far as I can tell. Enemies will not magically start moving in on you. However, if they're close enough to hear any noise you make, including firing weapons, they will likely come and investigate. And they may even be able to attack straight away when they do, if their alert level is high enough. Anyway, Wallace said it may have been a good idea for these guys to be sitting on top of the objective. I meant that in a theoretical sense. When it comes to execution, this was actually this pod's greatest mistake. See, we're able to flank both sides of the room, and it really leaves the A's with essentially nowhere they can go where we will not be able to get a flanking shot. And so we end up getting an easy victory here. This mission went much better than the previous. And even after we've hacked the objective and eliminated all the hostiles, we still have to call the Sky Ranger to evac out. Now you evac on most missions in this mod, and that means that coming across enemy corpses doesn't happen too often. So just something to keep in mind there. Now with the mission done, we've obtained the intel and we've taken our first step towards liberating New Arctic of Advent control. How are the aliens going to respond to our actions here today? Well, you're going to have to wait until next time to find out. So thank you for watching. If you enjoyed, please consider the usual things of liking, commenting and subscribing. I'd love to hear your feedback on this new format of video. And I've decided I'm going to be making these ones available a week early to Patreon supporters. So sign up for only a few bucks a month within the next 7 days and you'll get access to episode 2 before everyone else. And it'll be ad-free until the public release. The link to that is in the description if you're interested. So with all that said, I hope you enjoyed this one, and until next time, have a great day.